Good day, everyone. It is a privilege to share this reflection with you on a theme that bridges the oldest intuitions of the human spirit with the most advanced discoveries of contemporary science, imagining the Creator God from antiquity to astrophysics. Our subject today is both ancient and utterly modern. It asks how the human imagination, guided by reason, revelation, and wonder, has sought to understand the ultimate source of the universe. From Genesis to quantum cosmology, the idea of a creator has never been static. It has changed, evolved, deepened. Our task today is to trace this evolution, not to abandon faith for physics, nor to reduce theology to science, but to see how both discipline illuminate the same mystery from different angles, the origin and meaning of all that is. A panoramic overview. This exploration traverses an immense intellectual landscape. We will move through four major epochs of imagination: the ancient foundations, when myth, philosophy, and revelation first gave us cosmologies of divine creation; the Christian and medieval syntheses when theology harmonized Hebrew and Greek visions of a living, ordered cosmos; the scientific revolutions when Copernicus, Galileo, Kepler, Newton, and Einstein reframed the very structure of reality; and the contemporary reimagining when theology learns anew to speak of God within an evolving, expanding, and self organizing universe. The story is panoramic, but also deeply personal. For behind these cosmologies lies a single human longing to understand how the finite arises from the infinite, how being emerges from the mystery that we call God. Let's begin with ancient foundations. Let's begin with the ancient imagination. Four great visions shaped humanity's early understanding of creation: the Hebrew, the Platonic, the Aristotelian, and the Neoplatonic. In Genesis, God creates not by violence, but by word. In Plato's Timaeus, a divine craftsman, the demiurge, shapes matter after the model of eternal forms, animating it through a world soul. In Aristotle's Cosmos, the heavens rotate in perfect order, each sphere moved by its own intelligence. And in Plotinus, all things flow outward from the ineffable one, descending through successive emanations until they return in contemplation. Already here, we see a profound intuition. The world is not random, it is intelligible, ordered, luminous with meaning. The creator, however conceived, this creator is not a competing being among beings, but the principle of intelligibility itself, the ground from which all things emerge and toward which all things tend. Let's look at these one by one. In the Hebrew tradition, creation begins not in conflict, but in speech. In the beginning, God said. This is the language of authority and relationship, not of mechanics. God does not struggle against chaos. God speaks, and chaos yields to order. Here we encounter a distinctive metaphysical idea that the universe is founded not on necessity, but on freedom and meaning. The divine word, the Dabar, is creative, efficacious, performative. To speak is to bring forth being. Thus, the Hebrew imagination sees creation as a dialogue, a world brought into existence through communication. And in that communication, every creature becomes a response to the divine address. We move to Plato's world soul. The Greek imagination takes a different path. In Plato's Timaeus, creation is an act of intelligence, not mere command. The demiurge or divine craftsman or divine interior designer orders chaotic matter according to the eternal forms. But the genius of Plato's account lies in the idea of the world soul, a cosmic principle that mediates between eternal order and temporal becoming. The universe itself becomes alive. It is not a machine, but a living organism endowed with self motion. Here, the creator is not external to creation, rather, divine reason and beauty permeates the world itself. Creation, therefore, in this sense, is participation. The visible world participating in the eternal logic of the divine. We move to Aristotle's cosmic intelligences next. Aristotle further naturalized this theology or cosmology. In his system, the universe consists of concentric spheres, each animated by its own intelligence. There are, he tells us, 55 such intelligences culminating in the unmoved mover. Pure actuality, the object of universal desire. The celestial spheres rotate in imitation of this highest principle, and through their motion, they transmit order to the world below. Aristotle thus presents a cosmic hierarchy of motion and desire. Every being seeks its own perfection by imitating the divine. In this vision, the universe itself becomes a symphony of love, every movement a reflection of the eternal attraction toward the good. From Aristotle, we see an emergence of the cosmic Christ. The idea of the cosmic Christ stands at the heart of the Christian reinterpretation of ancient cosmology, where Greek philosophers spoke of a world soul or an unmoved mover. Christianity introduces the Logos as a living person, Christ, through whom all things came into being and in whom all things hold together. In this view, creation is not just the result of divine command, but an expression of divine presence. The world is not separate from God's life, but participates in it. Christ is thus seen as the inner principle of coherence uh, and vitality in the universe. The world that both speaks creation into existence and sustains it from within. Christian cosmology arises as harmonization of Hebrew thought and Greek cosmology. From the Hebrews, it inherited the vision of a sovereign creator who calls the world into being through love and command. From the Greeks, it absorbs the philosophical sense of an ordered cosmos governed by reason. The result is a worldview in which God is both transcendent and immanent, sovereign above creation, yet present within its rational order. These syntheses would shape theology, worship, and even early science for more than a millennium. The medieval cosmic vision. In the medieval imagination, the cosmos became a grand, ordered hierarchy with God enthroned above the firmament. The universe was pictured as a series of transparent spheres, each bearing planets in perfect rotation, transmitting divine motion through the heavens down to the earth. This was not seen as mechanical, but sacramental. The structure of the universe mirrored the structure of divine grace. Every movement in the heavens symbolized God's ceaseless activity in creation, sustaining, ordering, and vivifying all that exists. Here we see the celestial hierarchy. The celestial hierarchy reflects a vision of reality as participatory and harmonious. As the summit stands the triune God, or at the summit stands the triune God, source of all motion and grace. Below are the angelic orders, thrones, dominions, powers, singing the divine glory. Then come the cosmic intelligences that guide the planets, the celestial spheres carrying them in perfect harmony, and finally the earth, the living recipient of divine energy. This vision integrates metaphysics and devotion. To study the cosmos was, in a real sense, an act of prayer, a way of contemplating divine order through the rhythms of creation. Medieval thinkers saw divine energy as the bridge between God and creation. From the highest heavens flowed not only the motion that sustained the stars, but also the grace that renewed souls and enlivened the world below. The entire universe was viewed as a continuous descent of divine vitality from God's essence through angelic mediation to matter itself. In this sense, to exist at all was to participate in the outpouring of divine life. This cosmic vision finds its echo in Christian worship. The liturgy, especially the Eucharist, was understood as participation in the cosmic hymn of creation. When the church prays with angels and archangels with thrones and dominions, it joins its voice to the song of the heavens. In the liturgy, earth and heaven are united. Worship becomes the human response to cosmic grace, a reenactment of creation's original praise of its creator. And that will continue until the 16th century. In the 16th century, we see the Copernican revolution. A profound shift happens. Nicolaus Copernicus proposed that the sun, not the earth, lies at the center of planetary motion. This was not just an astronomical correction, it was a theological and existential revolution. Humanity, once believed to occupy the center of creation, found itself orbiting among other worlds. This centering of Earth and symbolically of humanity would challenge the medieval synthesis and begin a new age of questioning about the Creator's relation to the cosmos. In this way, ancient dogmas give way. And that's a serious blow to the medieval worldview. No? What's this serious blow to the medieval worldview? The discoveries of Copernicus, Galileo, and Kepler shattered the old medieval cosmos. No longer was the earth the center of creation, nor the heavens perfect and unchanging. The universe became vast, mathematical, and dynamic, a system governed by natural law rather than divine hierarchy. These mark a profound shift from a sacramental to a scientific worldview, deeply challenging medieval theology and medieval philosophy. The medieval that so here we see how ancient dogmas gave way. The Copernican model led to a rapid unraveling of older dogmas. Galileo's telescope showed mountains on the moon, proving the heavens were not made of perfect, incorruptible substance. Kepler discovered that planets move in elliptical orbits, not perfect circles. So the idea of celestial perfection gave way to a universe of imperfection, movement, and complexity. Creation was no longer a fixed hierarchy, but a dynamic, unfolding system, an insight that would pave the way for modern science. Kepler's revolutionary discoveries. Kepler's mathematical genius revealed that planets move faster when near the sun and slower when farther away, following precise laws of motion. These shattered the belief in circular perfection but uncovered a deeper harmony, the harmony of mathematical order rather than geometric ideal. Through Kepler, the universe ceased to be a symbolic and became quantifiable, yet still awe-inspiring. In his words, I was merely thinking God's thoughts after him. For Kepler, science did not dethrone God, it illuminated divine order through reason. And here we see the birth of modern science. The age of modern science emerged from these discoveries. Observation, experiment, and law replaced symbolic conceptions as a means to understand the world. Knowledge was now gained not through prayer or liturgy, but through measurement and analysis. Yet even this new method carried a kind of spirituality. For thinkers like Newton and Kepler, uncovering the laws of nature was itself a form of reverence, a way of tracing the rationality of the Creator written into creation, and in their minds, the mathematical universe was still a divine gift. Only the method of reading it had changed. Newton, therefore, remains to be the apogee of scientific revolution. With Isaac Newton, the scientific vision reached its classical form. His law of gravitation unified the falling apple and the orbiting moon under one principle. For the first time, humanity saw the cosmos as a single, coherent system governed by universal laws. Newton's universe was ordered, rational, rational, um, and this cosmos was a vast ordered mechanism that was created by God. So while Newton unified heaven and earth under one law, universal gravitation, the same force that pulls an apple downward keeps planets in orbit. For Newton, the cosmos was a vast ordered mechanism created by God, rational, elegant, and predictable, the clockwork universe. In the Newtonian worldview, God became a divine engineer, the one who designed the cosmic machine and set it in motion. Though majestic, this image distanced God from creation. The universe ran in terms of its own laws, independent of its own laws, and therefore capable of moving on its own. So, very mechanistic, right? Very mechanistic. Uh, so, this is therefore something to pay attention to. That's why for Newton, God is a divine clock maker. No? Uh, in the Newtonian worldview, God became the divine engineer, the one who designed the cosmic machine and set it in motion. Though majestic, this image distanced God from creation, and therefore the universe ran by its own law, leaving this little room for divine intimacy or continuous presence. That's why they say Alexander Pope would famously say, God said, let Newton be, and all was light. Uh, so even in the 18th and the 19th century, cracks began to appear in the Newtonian edifice. Astronomers noticed small irregularities in planetary motion. Philosophers questioned whether absolute space and time could truly exist. Meanwhile, developments in electricity, magnetism, and thermodynamics revealed that energy, not just matter, was fundamental to reality. Romantic thinkers began to protest the cold mechanistic view, and they yearned for a sense of divine presence and creativity within the laws themselves. Science, they believed, need not expel wonder, it could reveal deeper dimensions of divine action. Thus, the stage was set for a revolution, one that would redefine not only physics, but also theology and philosophy's understanding of creation, Einstein's revolution. In 1905, Albert Einstein published his special theory of relativity, challenging Newton's absolutes. He demonstrated that space and time are not fixed containers but relative to the observer. Only the speed of light remains constant. Time dilates, length contract, the fabric of reality itself is dynamic, not static. A decade later, Einstein's general theory of relativity went further. Gravity is not a force, but a curvature in space time. There. Uh, which caused by mass and energy. Matter tells space how to curve, then space tells matter how to move. The universe, once imagined as a rigid machine, now appeared elastic, relational, and alive. This was more than a scientific breakthrough. It was a philosophical transformation. Reality was no longer built on fixed substances, but on relationships, on the interplay of space, time, and energy. Creation, it seemed, was not a static order, but an ongoing event. Here we saw a universe that is dynamic. So Einstein's equations implied something astonishing. The universe could not be perfectly still. It must either expand or contract. At first, even Einstein resisted these conclusion, adding a cosmological constant to preserve cosmic stability. But the mathematics would not cooperate. The cosmos itself was restless and evolving. Because of that, he will eventually change his view. In this view, space and time are not separate stages on which matter acts, but part of the drama itself. The universe is self unfolding, self structuring, an ongoing movement of being. Philosophically, this marks a shift from substance to process, from law to becoming. Creation, therefore, is no longer a one time act in a distant past, it's a continuous rhythm of existence itself. In 1929, Edwin Hubble observed that distant galaxies are moving away from us. Their light stretched towards the red end of the spectrum. This discovery confirmed what Einstein's equations had hinted: the universe is expanding. Creation, therefore, is not complete, it's an ongoing event, a cosmic unfolding still in progress. The universe has a history and a direction is not and a direction. It's not eternal and static, but temporal and developmental. For philosophy, this is deeply resonant. Let there be light may not be a single moment in time, but the beginning of a process that continues across billions of years. The cosmos is not a finished artifact, it is a living creation still responding to its creator's call. Here we see the birth of modern modern cosmology. From the discoveries of Einstein and Hubble emerges modern cosmology, a new narrative of origins worth considering. The universe has a beginning, a structure, and an expansion. Space and time themselves come into existence, and with them, the laws that govern reality. In this new story, creation is not the imposition of order or chaos, but the emergence of form from potential. Matter, energy, and time all arise from a singular event of immediate density, what would later be called the Big Bang. This scientific creation story would soon invite dialogue with a very theological one. Father George Lemaitre, in 1931, Father George Lemaitre, a Belgian priest and physicist, proposed the theory of the primeval atom, the ancestor of today's Big Bang model. He suggested that the universe began from a single compact state that exploded outward, expanding and cooling to form galaxies and stars. Lemaitre saw no conflict between science and faith. For him, the Big Bang was not proof of divine creation, but a scientific description of its unfolding. He insisted that physics explains the how, while theology contemplates the why. Still, the resonance with Genesis was unmistakable. Let there be light. And here you see echoes of the Genesis text still with present with Lemaitre. No? So, in this new vision, creation now is continuous. The universe expands, evolves, and generates complexity. Stars gives birth to elements, elements from planets, life arises, consciousness awakens. Creation is not just behind us, it is happening now. For philosophy, this means reimagining God not as an engineer or of a finished machine, but as an ever active source of novelty. Here we see the dawn of quantum physics. In the early 20th century, we see a new challenge to both science and philosophy. At the smallest scales of reality, in atoms and subatomic particles, nature behaves not deterministically but probabilistically. Particles appear and vanish. Observation itself affects outcomes. Energy moves in discrete quanta. For the classical mind, this was chaos. But for philosophy and theology, it was revelation. Creation, it seemed, is not a mechanical unfolding of fixed laws, but an open field of possibilities. God's act of creation may not be the setting of immutable rules, but the empowerment of freedom within matter itself. Quantum theory suggests a universe grounded not in predictability but in potentiality. A world where uncertainty is not a flaw but the space in which creativity occurs. In theological and philosophical terms, this invites us to see divine providence not as rigid control, but as the gracious allowance of freedom at every level of being. Heisenberg's uncertainty principle captures the spirit of this new vision. One cannot know both the position and the momentum of a particle simultaneously. This is not due to a lack of precision, but a property of reality itself. The world is fundamentally relational and dynamic. These challenges the Newtonian picture of a fixed, predictable cosmos. Instead, the universe resembles a dance of indeterminacy, a constant interplay of chance and order. Philosophically, this means creation is not a static product, but a living performance, a symphony of possibilities continually sustained by divine presence. In such a world, God's creativity is not confined to the past. Every fluctuation, every quantum leap is an instance of the universe's participation in divine freedom. And that's something to pay attention to, no? Uh, we need to look at what is happening, and we will look at what is happening here. The understanding of quantum physics, the play between fermions, antiparticles, bosons, quarks, fields, and even strings. We need to pay attention at those. Uh, but we look at the four fundamental elements or forces. Physicists identify four fundamental forces that govern the cosmos: gravity, electromagnetism, the strong nuclear force, and the weak nuclear force. These forces emerge in the earliest moments of the universe's history, shaping matter and structure as space and time expanded. Each force plays a role in the cosmic drama. Gravity draws matter together while other forces generate diversity and stability. Their delicate balance makes stars, planets, and ultimately life possible. For philosophy, these forces can be read as signatures of divine rationality, the intrinsic intelligibility of creation. They show a universe that is not chaotic but finely tuned for relationality and emergence, suggesting that order and freedom coexist in the very fabric of being. Here we see eventually cosmic evolution, cosmic evolution. Uh, Over billions of years, the universe has evolved from simplicity to complexity, from plasma to stars, from elements to life. Cosmic history, therefore, tells of self reorganization, where order arises from dynamic interaction rather than external imposition. The process challenges us to rethink divine creation not as static perfection, but as unfolding creativity. God's act of creation continues through cosmic evolution, though through stars that burn, die, and give birth to new worlds. The Creator works not by dictating outcomes, but inviting participation in becoming. Thus, the story of the universe becomes a sacred narrative. When the first stars formed, they became forges of creation, producing heavier elements through nuclear fusion. When the stars exploded, uh, as supernova or novae, they scattered those elements across the cosmos, carbon, oxygen, and iron, and the building blocks of life. Were born in these cosmic deaths. So we are quite literally stardust become conscious. And that's something to pay attention to. And then we'll see the emergence of life, no? Uh, the battles, the formation of the atoms, as we said, the birth of the stars. We look at this more in detail as we move forward. Or even the reality of multiple universes, or the role of quarks, or conflict inflation. Uh, all of those until we basically find life on Earth and on one small planet under just the right conditions, matter organized into living form. Cells emerge, life diversified, consciousness evolved. This is the biological expression of the same creative impulse that shaped the cosmos. For philosophy, life's emergence testifies to a universe that is inherently fertile and generous, creation capable of producing beings that can know and even love, rather than seeing evolution as a threat to divine design. We can understand it as a method of divine creativity. And there we see why the human person is important, no? Uh, because here we see already human consciousness marking a new phase of cosmic awareness in us. The universe reflects upon itself, creation becomes self aware. We are not separate from the cosmos, but expressions of its deepest potential. This has profound philosophical meaning, therefore. To be human is to participate in the ongoing efforts of creation. So we need to reimagine the Creator God. The scientific vision of an evolving, indeterminate universe invites a reimagining of God as Creator. No longer the distant clockmaker, God becomes the immanent source of creative potential, the power of being itself. Creation is not a completed event, but a continuous unfolding of divine generosity. And this perspective aligns with process philosophy, evolutionary theology, where God's action is persuasive rather than coercive. guiding creation towards fullness rather than forcing it into design. God creates by letting be, not in controlling. And that's where we need to question divine relation. How do we reimagine the Creator God in relation to the emerging and developing universe? That's the question. Why do we have to stick to a concept of a predetermining God when there seems to be more to it? And therefore, the Creator God must be understood differently. And that is what the entire course is all about. Thank you for listening.